it is incredibly important for us to ensure that we explain both the moral responsibility, but also the self-interest we have in supporting a robust immigration system. In the recent past, so many people who came through a legal pathway have had that legal status threatened or rescinded. That's obviously very difficult when you talk about immigrants who, they came the right way, they did everything that we asked of them, and now they may be vulnerable, for example, to being deported back to Afghanistan. That's hard to understand and to communicate why that's happening to our clients.
Today's guest is Krish O'Mara Vignarajah, President and CEO of Global Refuge, one of the leading organizations in the U.S. supporting refugee resettlement and humanitarian relief. Krish's story began in Sri Lanka, where her family fled a civil war when she was just 9 months old. They arrived in the U.S. with only $200 and no jobs. Decades later, she built an incredible career in public service, from serving as policy director for First Lady Michelle Obama to leading Global Refuge through one of the most challenging times for immigrants and refugees. In this conversation, Krish shares her family journey, her path to leadership, and how storytelling and empathy guide her work to create real change. Before we begin, I want to play a short clip from Krish's Tech Talk from 2024. You can also find a link to this talk in the episode description.
Immigrants are so often on the front lines of our nation's success, keeping our lights on and our hospitals running, fixing our infrastructure, and in this case, repairing our roads at 1 a.m. They reflect something unique to the U.S. While we, like other nations, have the drive, the grit, the spirit from those born in our country to innovate, grow, and achieve great things, we also have another gift, something that no other nation has on the scale that we do, a superpower, unique to our nation's DNA and central to the notion of the American dream.
Krish, thank you so much for joining. I'm very excited to talk to you. How are you feeling today?
Enjoying the sunshine on a crisp fall day, taking every day by day, just because you never know what the news is going to bring. We just had an all staff, and it was a joyful occasion for so many passionate, committed folks who really bring such energy and compassion to the work of welcome.
Your family moved to the U.S. when you were a baby. You may not remember that's part of your life, but how did your parents told you that story growing up?
For them, it was interesting because when they first arrived, I think they were so focused on just integrating, becoming American, feeling like they were a sense of a community. And so their focus was not early on that history. I think as I got older, they wanted me to remember my background, to realize how lucky we were as I got older. And I think when I had the maturity to understand what a civil war is, what it means to have so many members of your community killed, was, I think, when I learned their experience and our journey to the U.S.
How do you carry those early lessons that your parents gave you today, especially as a mother and raising your 2 kids?
I think it's important for my kids to know the experience of their grandparents. So it's nice to have that close connection between my parents and my kids. I've had a chance to take them to Sri Lanka. That was pretty amazing. My younger daughter was just about a year and my older daughter was 7. And they had such an incredible experience, better understood how lucky they are, how lucky we are. And I think it's also just making sure they understand that the circumstances of other families today, just so that they can continue to have that empathy and understanding of why the work of Global Refuge is, I sometimes say that my life and my girls' lives will be easier because my parents' lives were hard. I think to me that has been what's at the heart of what Global Refuge does. I think that's been really important for me to explain to them.
Absolutely. Did you travel with your parents to Sri Lanka as a child or later in life?
So when we were younger, my parents tried to travel with us one time when there was a ceasefire, and it ended up being this situation where tensions grew. They imposed curfews, and we had actually trouble leaving the country. And so I think as a result, my parents didn't want to travel again. It was an amazing experience. I remember vividly going from military checkpoint to military checkpoint. That has certainly stayed with me for a long time.
Yes, you built an amazing career in public service. What drew you in the beginning to that specific career and how you built of amazing roles working from the White House and now in Global Refuge? What was it at the beginning that drove you to this?
I think for me, it was trying to find some way to give back, just knowing how different my life would have been if we had remained in Sri Lanka or gone to Nigeria as my parents planned. But my journey was I became a lawyer. I worked in management consulting. I went into the federal government and served in the Obama administration. It was an incredible experience to be approached by the Global Refuge, then Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service board to say, would you consider this experience? It's been quite a journey over the last 6 years.
Talk a little bit about your work at the White House and how that also made you have the role that you have today.
It was an interesting experience because I think Michelle Obama really knew how important it was to focus on issues that weren't getting the national attention that they deserved, even though they were bipartisan or nonpartisan issues. And so I think that really gave me an experience of how do you focus on issues that are not getting the attention they deserve. And so having the chance to work on girls' education, I think was really incredible. Trying to figure out how do you better communicate. I mean, obviously, you're doing a podcast now. The White House had such a savviness in terms of appreciating that in an era of social media and other forums of communication, it was really important to be out there and to try to meet people where they are.
And how, after that, what drove you to Global Refuge? Well, first, can you explain to the main mission in your work there?
Yeah, since 1939, our mission has been to welcome newcomers. That has been brought to life by resettling refugees, focus on serving children and families, working with companies around economic empowerment, knowing that if we undertake this work fairly, we are both able to serve our clients as well as our communities.
I'm curious on that mission. How do you work with policy makers, especially right now with all the attacks against immigrants with this administration?
We really try to find community-based partnerships to make sure that we are explaining who we are, what we do, and why we serve the clients that we serve. It's been incredible to see how communities across the country have been very excited to roll up their sleeves. And this is kind of a range of institutions, whether we're talking about faith-based like congregations, or schools or book clubs, entities who just really want to help. They get involved with our Hope for the Holidays campaign. They help pack for kits, which go to new arrivals. And it's been just really amazing over the years, whether it was responding to the Ukrainian crisis or our Afghan allies coming here to the US after serving us during America's longest war. Just to see the enthusiasm for this work has been really inspiring.
And Global Refuge has welcomed more 800,000 newcomers. Correct me if I'm wrong. What does this legacy mean to you? And how can we understand it as well, considering the current situation?
Yeah, I think it has been hard when you realize that many communities have been impacted, that there is really a global crisis in terms of migration. And so what we have tried to do is figure out how we can be more nimble, how we can ensure that we are serving the range of needs, whether that is people who come with nothing, people who are coming for economic reasons and they may have an economic visa to work with a company. We try to serve clients realizing that right now there's such adversity and so much hate that is really grounded in fear mongering. And that's really hard because those who actually understand the work, who have been a part of it, know that these are not criminals, that they're not mules, that they're really just earnest families, that they're trying to do what's right, that they're trying to help their families. I think that's what's hard when you see the vitriol in the news.
How do you work with clients? And I'm saying just to understand, like you said, it could be a company, it could be a person. Um, how do you handle the amount of people that need global refuge?
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is understand that we're never going to do it all. And frankly, the US isn't going to be able to help everyone. So our hope is to really serve the populations where we have a comparative advantage. And that has been around children as well as refugees who come through the United Nations or the US Embassy.
And now with the recent administration announced that the refugee admission ceiling is just 7,500 people for the fiscal year 2026. How is your team working around this decision?
I think so much of our staff have been impacted and it's hard, right? You're on the front lines. Our staff themselves feel like they're personally attacked. And so that's difficult because they are the emotional crutch for so many of our clients. And yet they themselves are experiencing attacks. And so I think that's why we try to figure out how we support our staff, how we support our clients, how we support the partners who have done this work with us for 86 years, but at the same time, realizing that in many ways we're working in a difficult environment.
There's so much misinformation as refugees and immigrants that shape how people view these issues. From your perspective, what would be the main misconception that you would want to work on or that we need to work on as a society to change?
I think it's a general misconception that this is entirely charity. And I think it's important to appreciate, yes, some of our immigration programs are humanitarian based, but the reality is that in terms of immigration, have a history as a nation of immigrants, that it is both the right thing to do as well as the smart thing to do. We face a demographic cliff because we have the lowest birth rate since the census has been tracking this issue, and that it is incredibly important for us to ensure that we explain both the moral responsibility, but also the self-interest we have in supporting a robust immigration system.
What are the main things that you are focused on right now as a lead for Global Refuge?
There's a few things that we are focused on right now. One piece is just trying to figure out how we keep legal pathways functioning, of course, strengthening them to the extent that we can. Also, we're focused on making sure we respond to what has been the greatest de-documentation of immigrants in the recent past. So many people who came through a legal pathway have had that legal status threatened or rescinded. That's obviously very difficult when you talk about immigrants who, they came the right way, they did everything that we asked of them, and now they may be vulnerable, for example, to being deported back to Afghanistan. That's hard to understand and to communicate why that's happening to our clients. And then, of course, we're focused on advocacy. The truth is, this comes as no surprise to anyone, but it is a system that in many ways needs reform. And yet we find that Congress, some political leaders would rather use this as a political hot potato rather than reform a dysfunctional system. Also an area where we hope to use our programmatic expertise to bring real policy change.
Yes. How can we support Global Refuge Well, I'm talking as an immigrant, but in general, how would you invite people to support?
I think part of it is making sure that your audience learns the facts so that we can fight fiction with fact. My view is that we can debate issues around immigration, but it's got to be grounded in reality. It can't be a matter of fear mongering. And so I think that's where I'd welcome your audience to go to globalrefuge.org, where we regularly provide resources, an action hub. I think that's the second piece, which is we can't have folks sit on the sidelines. We need people to take action, be ambassadors for the work of welcome, to reach out to representatives to talk about how important immigration is. I sometimes say to employers, one of the greatest impacts you can have is hire an immigrant. It is obviously life changing, not just for our clients, but for employers who regularly say they gain so much out of hiring an amazing, driven, reliable employee. And then I just think finally, we have upcoming campaigns like our Hope for the Holidays campaign, where we write cards, we send gifts to children who may be without family, they may be in detention. And so that's obviously a very relevant effort that I'd love folks to get involved.
Yes, all of those things were so important. In your TED Talk about a year ago, you said that despite the immigration issues in this country, the American dream still endures. I'm curious if you feel that way today.
Well, I would say that everyday challenge is how open we are to immigrants. Every time I tune into social media, I see the trolling. It's hard because, of course, you wonder, where is this hate coming from? Why aren't people getting the facts? And so I think it just makes me appreciate how important the work is, how important the work of Global Refuge and so many other nonprofits is. And I think that's what keeps me going. Opportunities like this to set the record straight, to give people an opportunity to engage. It's amazing how many people have asked exactly the question you raise. And so that's been really exciting.
I know you have to, Krish, final question. What gives you?
I think a staff member said it well in a recent meeting. We're just humans helping human beings. And I think that's what gives me hope. The chance that I have to go across the country to meet some amazing people and to feel like even in this hostile environment, there are still people who care, who want to help. And I think that is what makes me believe, though we're going through a storm, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, Krish. Amazing. I admire everything that Global Refuge is doing. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. I hope this conversation inspired you to support the work that Krish and her team at Global Refuge do every day. If you want to get involved, please join globalrefuge.org. You can find ways to donate, volunteer, or join the campaigns that she mentioned in this episode. And remember that every small action makes a difference. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining.